Chimo, greetings. I'll say for tuning in. We just want to give a couple of minutes for people to log in. So just give me 1 second. I need to check the light. Okay, I'm gonna put a link in the chat room for the book. Okay, so that's the link right there. So you can download that. As with all of our books, you can download them for free. All 31 of our books you can download for free. Okay, I just want to make sure it's showing up properly. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so Chimo, greetings. I say everyone for tuning into this special broadcast. We wanted to examine our book, the Okraa Complex, the Soul of Akanfo. We're talking about the nature of the soul, the divinity that governs the head. Now, this is a special broadcast because this year is actually the 10th anniversary of our publishing of this book. It's the most extensive analysis of the nature and function of the Okraa, which is the term, male and female terms for a soul in the Akan language. Also, the Ka and Kait, the male and female terms for soul in ancient Kamit. So we show the continuity of culture once again between ancient Kamit and Kamit, Nubia and Egypt, and Akan culture in West Africa, Afuraitkaitnut, and of course that carries over for those who are Akan people into the Western Hemisphere. We were forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Musuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. So Akan ancestral religion in North America is the Hoodoo tradition. We still deal with the divinity that governs the head, the soul, the divine consciousness, and so forth. So this is what we want to examine in detail. For those who are unaware, I am Odwirafo, Kwesi Radnehmbata Akan. Odwirafo of Akwamu Mine, Amaruka, Etifimu, the Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojira Mine, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So very often you hear people say, what is the definition of the soul? What is the nature of the soul? And the definitions that people put forward are always inaccurate because they're drawing from inaccurate, false sources. The so-called Hebrew language and talking about the soul, how it's defined in Judaism, we're defined in Christianity, we're defined in Islam, we're defined in Hinduism, we're defined in Buddhism, we're defined in Taoism, we're defined in pseudo-esotericism like Sufism, Kabbalism, Gnosticism, and various expressions of pseudo-esotericism coming from the West. All of those definitions are absolutely 100% false. So you'll hear a number of different people, but we talk about the original and accurate definition. In the true sense, the soul, which is called Ka in ancient Kamit for men, Kat or Kait for women, it is a deity. It is a male divinity if you're male, a female divinity if you're female, trying to dwell in the head region of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African Black people, the great mother and great father, supreme being, Amenet and Amen, who work together as the great divine mother and divine father. They direct a specific divinity to take up residence in the head region of our spirit body within our spiritual anatomy. And that divinity we communicate with, we are guided by, that divinity carries our divine function we are to execute in the world. And that divinity dwelling in our headspace, no different than physically, you have a physical body, and there's a smaller physical body that dwells in the head region of your physical body that has the blueprint of everything that should take place in the physical body. Of course, that is the brain. In your spirit body, which we call Sum Sum in the Akan language, which is called Sahu in ancient Kamit. Within the spirit body, there's a radiant force dwelling in the head region of the spirit body. That radiant force is a personal divinity, a living conscious entity, a male divinity for men, males, female divinity for females, and so forth. That divinity was directed by the Supreme Being to take up residence in your head region and guide you throughout the course of your life. And that divinity goes back to Nyame wa Nyame or Amenet and Amen after you transition to report on the way you functioned in the world. The whites and their offspring don't have a deity assigned to them. They have no capacity to communicate with nor be possessed by the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Arusi, the Ntoru, the divinities. So they have no capacity to understand what a soul actually is. So when they talk about soul means breath, or soul just means being conscious and so forth, they can never give you the proper definition that there's a deity assigned to the head region that's part of your spirit genetic blood circle, because they do not have that. That's why every time you hear somebody talking about or trying to define the soul from Eurocentric sources, or even when you hear Black people trying to, pontificate about what the nature of the soul is, and they talk about consciousness and they talk about breath and all these different things, all of their definitions are 100% false. So let's deal with real, conscious, actual, accurate information. So this is the book. Okay, so this is the book, the Okra Complex. And we're going to show why we have this symbol of the Ka, which are the two arms and so forth. Excuse me, and we have the brain in between. So, and we'll talk about these symbols as we go along. So the first thing that we touch on, and once again, the way the book is written, we say the Soul of Akanfo because we're an Akan organization and so forth, but once again, we show how Akan people originated in ancient Kanit and Kemet, Nubian Egypt, migrated west, established the ancient empire of Akana or Ghana a couple of thousand years ago. About 1,000 years after that, there were Muslim invasions, so our people migrated further south towards the forest belt, the region of today's Ghana, Ivory Coast. And then hundreds of years after that, some of our people were forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Musuo Kessier, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. So those of us who are Akan, who ended up in, the United States, we continued Akan ancestral religion as the Hoodoo tradition, Hoodoo comes from the Akan term undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, and plant life. Undu also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession and spirit communication. And undu also means to feel a presentiment or foreboding, or to see what's unfolding in the spirit realm in the context of divination to make proper decisions. So there's a continuity of culture from ancient Ka and Kait into West Afuraitkaitnut, into the way we practice ancestral religion today. Now, so the first thing that we touch on here is that true historical information. But first we want to see, this is Amen, the great father, and Amenet, the great mother, the male and female divinity that comprise the supreme being. As we talked about in our previous broadcast, who is the great mother? We talked about how the oldest religious compositions yet unearthed anywhere in the world are the Meru texts, or so-called pyramid texts. Babylon, or the Akkadian Empire and so forth, or Hinduism, or Taoism, or any other quote-unquote tradition, none of those writings or texts or pseudo-traditions are older than the Meru text or the pyramid text. And then the oldest religious texts yet unearthed in the world, we find Amen, the great father, and Amenet, the great mother, together in the oldest religious texts. So there's always been the great father and great mother. There was never a time when there was just a great father. There was never a time when there was just a great mother. There's always been the balance, the complementary balance of Amen and Amenet, who in our Akan culture are called Nyamewa, the great mother, and Nyame, the great father. So we showed them. And then we get into this notion of the term Ka. So if you look in the language of ancient Ka and Kait, you see the term Ka. You see the two arms like this, the Ka symbol. And then when you look in the Akan language, you see the term Kra, pronounced Kra or Kra. The root of the term is Ka, and Ara is an infix, basically. It extends on the root or the stem. So we have various representations of that in the Akan language. For example, you have the term So, which means up above or heavens. Then you have Soro, which also means up above or heavens. That was an extension of the original root. You have Ka, which means soul, divine consciousness, and so forth. Kra or Kra in Akan means the same thing in the Akan language. And you see Okra, also written just Kra, and the full spelling is Kara, the soul of a man. That's from the Asante Fanti dictionary, the tree dictionary of the Akan language. So Ka for males, Kat or Kait for females in the ancient language, Kra for males in Akan, and Krawa or Kra for females in the Akan language. Now, so that's what we're saying up here, talking about Ka and Kait and Kra, Krawa, and so forth, also written Okra, and the A is just a prefix in the Akan language. Now, what's important, as we said earlier, is the bolded section right here. In both languages, the Ka or the Kait, male or female, or in the Akan language, Kra or Krawa or Okra-Okra, is the divine consciousness that dwells within the head of the person. This is true in Akan language and culture and religious practice. It's true in ancient Ka and Kait. I'm going to prove that. It is important to note that this consciousness is not merely awareness, but an actual entity. So when people talk about consciousness as simply awareness and awareness of where you are and who you are and all of that, We're talking about a deity, a separate and distinct deity that has its own existence, and that divinity is directed by Inyamewa and Inyame or Amen and Amen. You go dwell with this person, take up residence in his or her spiritual head, and guide them throughout the course of their life. And then the divinity says, yes, I will do that, and goes and installs itself in the head of the individual. That's an actual divinity, a personal abosom. Abosom is the term for deity in the Akan language. A personal orisha. It's called Ori Inu in the Yoruba language. That's the inner spiritual head. That is the personal orisha that the individual communicates with. In Vodun, it's the Selido, that is the personal Vodou that dwells in the head region. In Igbo, that's the Chi, that is the personal Arusi, the personal deity that communicates with the person, and the person communicates with that divinity. And when you go against the direction of the deity that dwells in your head region, then you notice you have problems in life. We purify our head to make ourselves more receptive to that divinity. Sometimes that force is felt as a pull in the head region towards certain thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order, and also a pull away from certain things that are out of harmony with divine order. The more you engage in ritual practice, it's not simply experienced as a pull in the head one way or the other, but you can actually see the divinity, interface with the divinity, and so forth. Now, so then we start talking about in Akan culture, the divine spirit forces in creation, operating through and animating the sun, moon, earth, rivers, oceans, fire, mountains, the atmosphere, and more are children of Inyamewa, Inyame, the great mother and great father, supreme being, which is Amenet and Amen. These are the goddesses and gods, the children of the great god and great goddess. They're called Abosom, plural, Obosom, singular, the embodiments of divine order in creation. And we always use this example because it's a direct example. They are the organs within the great divine body of the supreme being. So just like you have a body, it's an emanation. If you're an Afurakani man of Amen, the great God, you're an Afuraitkaitnit woman, your body is an emanation of Amenet, the great mother, and so forth, in a microcosmic aspect. So your body is the great being. It gives birth to smaller bodies, organs, glands, and so forth, heart, liver, lungs, spleen, brain, and so forth. Those smaller beings regulate order in your body, and then they give birth to smaller beings, which are the cells, heart cells, liver cells, spleen cells, and so forth. And those cells live in harmony with their parent organ or parent deity. When they live in harmony with their parent organ or parent deity, they serve you, the great being, at the same time. And of course, the organs within the great divine body of the supreme being are the spirits that animate the suns, moons, stars, black substance of space, planets, oceans, rivers, atmosphere, fire, core of earth, and so forth. All these different features of creation. These are the goddesses and gods, the children of the great god and great goddess. There are Abosom in Akan, and Orisha in Yoruba, and Vodou in Ewe, and Arusi in Igbo, and so forth. And then they give birth to smaller beings, children, cells, which are plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Black human life, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Black human life only. We only Afurakani people, Afuraitkaitnit people, are children of the Abosom. We are the cells, just like plant life, animal life, and mineral life. And we have the energy of different divinities. So you have certain plants that are fiery, certain animals that are fiery, certain minerals that have that fire energy, certain human beings have that fire energy because we're children of fiery divinities. Certain plants are more watery and cool. Certain animals are more watery and cool, have a watery, cool, energetic temperament. Certain minerals have that cool energy and so forth. And certain human beings, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, have a cooler temperament because we're children of cooler or water divinities and so forth. So we're classified according to the divinity that we are children of. The whites and their offspring are not connected to any divinity, so they're not part of that classification. Just like you have cells in your body, natural, healthy, and so forth. Some cells become cancerous, they become disfigured, and then they seek to consume and destroy all of the other cells in the body. And less than 1 out of every 100,000 cells in your body right now have become cancerous. They've become disfigured They don't look like the other cells, and they malfunction. They do not function as the other cells. But your immune and lymphatic system separates them, isolates them, kills them, and expels them from the body on a daily basis, consistent. The whites and their offspring, meaning non-Black people who've only been around for a few thousand years, white Europeans, white Asians, Hindus, and so forth, they've only been on Earth for a few thousand years. They are the cancerous cells in the body of Black humanity who emerged in Northern Eurasia. They spilled out of Northern Eurasia at the end of the last ice age, being a disfigured group that lost their pigmentation and that spiritual connection. And therefore, they seek to consume and destroy every one of us in their path whenever they can. They've been doing that for thousands of years, whenever they could. For most of that time period, they were unsuccessful. They've only been successful over the past couple of hundred years and so forth. But they will continue to do so until we make them extinct, until we eradicate them, make them extinct. They will always seek to consume and destroy because their nature, their ill nature is that cancerous ill nature. And they will always demonstrate that. So non-Black individuals are the cancerous cells within the body of Black humanity. That's a reality that's immutable. Now, so when we're talking about this, and we talk about in that section of the book, we're talking about the pull in the head and so forth, the divinity in the head that governs, basically the spirit's brain, the spirit body's brain, just like your physical brain governs your physical body, your spiritual brain or your Ka, your Kait governs your spirit body. But every quote unquote pull in your head or inclination is not evidence of that divinity. Sometimes you have an inclination or a pull because you have a certain conditioning, certain triggers, certain traumas, certain things you've conditioned yourself to desire or have a repulsion for, and so forth. Sometimes you have communication from an ancestral spirit, male or female. Sometimes you have a communication from a discarnate spirit that is not related to you. We learn to discern the differences between the disembodied communications when we engage in ritual practice. Through ritual practice and attuning to your own Nkra and attuning to your own Nananom Nsamanfo spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, when you engage those ritual practices on a consistent basis, then you learn to discern the differences. And we always use the example, it's no different than when a married couple has a newborn child and they're not familiar with, dealing with infants and so forth, and the child is crying at first for the first, week or two, all they hear is crying. But the more they engage their child, they can begin to discern the difference between the kind of cry that is saying, I'm hungry, the kind of cry that's saying, I'm sleepy, the kind of cry that's saying, I'm in pain, and so forth. You can discern the difference, or I need to be changed, and so forth. You can discern the differences between those 4 different expressions of crying because you're in tune with the child. When you become in tune with the divinity that governs the head and your Nananom Nsamanfo, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, and the Abosom, the forces of nature in general, because you engage in ritual practice on a consistent basis in a purified fashion, ritual song, ritual dance, ritual chant, ritual movement, and so forth, ritual prayer, then you attune your receptors and you begin to learn how to discern the difference. So sometimes you feel a quote unquote pull in the head, that's not coming from my Nkra. That's not a divine or divinely consciously guided, instruction. That's coming from somebody else. Just like you could walk down the street and see a homeless person and they say something crazy, that's coming from this individual who's discordant. So you keep it moving. But if that person transition and their spirit is in that spot, you're not spiritually receptive, you walk by that individual, that's the place that they died, their spirit is still hanging around that spot. And once you walk by that spot, you get this communication in your head that you need to move and do something that's self-destructive. And you say, well, I have this pull in my head to do a certain thing. Maybe that's my Nkra. Maybe that's my soul. Maybe that's my divine consciousness. Maybe this is my ancestor or ancestress guiding me. But in reality, it's not. Simply because you're not receptive enough, because you weren't engaged in ritual practice consistently, you assume that disembodied communication from a discordant, self-destructive spirit is something having to do with divine guidance, and it's not. So we need to make those distinctions. And within the culture, we understand how to do that. Now, so that's what we're saying in that particular section. In this section on race and the Okraa, and of course, race is reality. Europeans tried to put forth the false notion that because we're Black, we're inferior. And then, of course, when we started studying melanin, we started to realize the truth that white skin doesn't make them superior. White skin is actually inferior. And once we understood that in detail by studying biology and genetics and so forth, all of a sudden they started putting out this false notion that race doesn't exist. They don't want to talk about race anymore. They want to the truth about race. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to make sure we all right. So, and the same is true spiritually. When we talk about spirits incarnating into the world, you have a man and a woman. When your mother and father got together and so forth and brought you into the world, you were an ancestor who returned to the world, or an ancestress who returned to the world. You were either one of the ancestors or ancestresses of your father from his blood circle, or you were one of the ancestresses or ancestors of your mother from her blood circle from 200 years ago or 300 years ago and so forth. And you returned to the world. For our people, for Afurakani people, unless, in fact, we're going to pull up a different document real quick, one of our books. Just to show this image. Okay, so this is one of our this is another one of our 31 books. And we're talking about the Okraa Bosom, the deities that govern the 7 days of the week in the Akan tradition. But we were using this schematic just so you can have a better understanding. So when we're talking about a spirit, you know, an ancestral spirit in the world, in the ancestral realm and so forth, and we're showing this as a representation of the Sum Sum, of the spirit and so forth. Before we're drawn into the womb, when you know your mother and father copulate and drew your spirit back into the womb before you were drawn back into the womb, whether we're talking about Akan culture, Yoruba culture, Ewe culture, and no matter where Afurakani people exist in the world, we have the proper and same understanding. We are drawn up to Nyame wa Nyame, who was called Mawu and Lisan Vodun and Olokun and Olorun in Yoruba, and of course Aminet and Amen and Ejikamet, Komosu and Chukwu in the Igbo tradition, the great mother and great father supreme being. We're drawn up to them. They direct a specific divinity to take up residence in our head region. Our divine function, what kind of cell within the great divine body we are to be, is written into that spiritual force. That divinity takes up residence in the head region, and this red circle is representative of the divinity taking up residence in the head region. And now it's a Sum Sum, a spirit body that has an Okraa or Okrawa, a soul, a divine consciousness, a divinity in the head region. Now this is a spirit with a soul. And now the spirit with the soul and a divine function to execute in the world, so-called destiny, but a divine function. Now that entity, that individual can be sent into the womb of the mother. Now the whites and their offspring, when they transition, There's spirits like this. They're in the lower level of the spirit realm. And when their descendants copulate, they just draw them right back into the spirit realm like this. They never go before Nyame wa Nyame or Amenet and Amen. They're not assigned a divinity and so forth. When you consistently engage in disorder and you become an incarnate spirit of disorder, which the whites and offspring are, why we call them Achiwadiefo, spiritually prohibited and so forth, taboo. When you consistently engage in disorder, you make yourself repulsive to divine order. Just like when you have two magnets on the table with the same polarities facing, if you push one near the other one, it pushes it away without touching. When you engage in disorder and you incarnate as a spirit of disorder, you are repulsive to and repelled by spirits of order. So the whites and offspring simply are spirits without a soul, without a divine consciousness, without a divinity governing them, and they just reincarnate through their blood circles in the same fashion. They never go beyond the spirit realm to Inyame wa Inyame, get infused with the divinity, and then get sent into the womb. That's the difference between us racially and spiritually. Now, so we get into some detail about that in the book. So when you read that section, you can see the details about not only the differences between us, physiologically with regard to melanin dominance and melanin recessiveness and so forth. When people engage in disorder, become repulsive to their own Nkra, repulsive to the forces of divine order, which are the divinities, then they incarnate as spirits of disorder. That's the nature of the white snarl spring. They incarnate in this fashion. So there's no exception to that reality. It's not like, well, some of them have a soul and some of them, none of them have a Ka or a Kait. When you use the term soul, that's just an amorphous term that doesn't mean anything. When we talk about the real term, do they have a Ka? Do they have a Kait? Do they have a divinity dwelling in the head region? No, that's why in all of their cultures, they don't have a proper definition of soul because they don't have a deity dwelling in the head region that's connected to them spirit genetically. They don't have that concept. So they'll say soul just means breath, or soul means awareness. They don't have the concept of having a divinity dwelling in their head region that has their divine function that's connected to their matriclan and patriclan blood circles because they don't have it. Only in our languages do we have that. You won't find that in any Asian traditions or anything else either. Now, but you can read, when we talk about that, you'll see it's, when you read that section, we go into just some detail just to prove that. But let's get into the cosmology. So, in ancient Kanadian Kamit, once again, the term Ka, that's the Medut, the hieroglyph for the term Ka. Now, it can be spelled with the bowl, which is the Ka sound, and the eagle with the Ah sound, but then you'll also simply spell it with the two arms. And there's a reason for this representing the Ka, the soul of the divine consciousness. So this literally spells Ka with the stroke right here. And this is Ka, and the little, what looks like a half circle is actually a loaf of bread. And that is the T sound that represents the Ta or the T sound. That is the feminizing symbol. So you have Ka and Kait. Also written Ka and Kait. Just like you have Ra and Ra'et, or Amen and Amenet, or Asar and Aset, and so forth. Now, and that's because we have that T is a concretizing symbol and force, but it's also the feminizing symbol and force and so forth. That was retained in European languages. So when you have Sean and Shawnette, George and Georgette, John and Johnette, and so forth, and the et feminizes, it's a diminutive, that's where it's taken from. So, now when you look at the term, you see that the position of the Ka, the soul, divine consciousness, is shown to reside in the head. Inside of the two arms and shoulders is the space where the head resides. A variation of this notion is when the Ka symbol is shown upon the head of an individual. It focuses attention upon the fact that the Ka is associated with the head. So when Akan people say the Nkra is in the head region, when Yoruba people say the Ori Inu is the inner spiritual head, when the people, Ewe people say the Selido is the divinity in the head, when the Igbo people say the Chi is the deity in the head, they're saying, of course, the same thing we said in ancient Kamit and Kamit. The Medut, the symbol itself, is representative. If you're just writing it, you write it in this fashion, but of course the head is in between the two arms when they're lifted up. But when you see where they place the Ka, they don't place it in the stomach, they don't place it by the legs and so forth. They show it's positioned on the head region because that's where the force resides. And of course, so this is a pair A, so-called pharaoh and so forth, but you also have another symbol, man, seated and so forth, pointing to himself, but this is a symbol for Ka. So we have proof that they pinpointed in the head region, just like we continue to do for thousands of years, all over West Afuraka, Afuraikai, West Africa. Now, the next portion that corroborates what we say in West and Central and South and East and North Afuraka, Afuraikai, another spelling of Ka is the two arms, and then the seated, shrouded divinity. When you see a seated, shrouded divinity that is represented or image like this, in this form, this expression is a male divinity with a beard and so forth, male entity with a beard. Sometimes you will see it with a female shrouded entity sitting there. When you see that shrouded entity sitting there, that means that term Ka doesn't represent a male like a man. That term Ka represents a deity. That is the determinative symbol for deity, divinity. If that symbol wasn't there, it would just say Ka. With that symbol there saying Ka, meaning a divine entity. So in ancient Kamit and Kamit, the Ka, the soul, is a deity. The Ka'et, the soul, is a deity. And of course, that's true all over Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, Africa, and of course in the Western Hemisphere where we brought the traditions here. We also show that in the Akan language, the term Nkra do means the seat of the Nkra. That's also the term for shoulders. So in the Akan language, when they say Nkra do, the shoulders are the seat of the Nkra. They're saying linguistically what we drew pictorially, ideographically in ancient Kamit. Now, if you look further into the Akan language, this is from the Akan dictionary. The root Ka, what does it say? What does it mean? To touch, to come or be in, to come or be in or bring into contact with, to join. So the general term Ka in the Akan language, in the Chui language of the Akan people, to touch, to come in contact with, to join. When you see the two arms up, they're reaching out and touching. They're grabbing that spiritual force that's in the head region, touching, coming in contact with, joining, and so forth. The Akan language is explicitly defining what the symbol for the same term Ka has been used in ancient Kamit for thousands of years, and Kamit. Now, we pinpoint the region. So it's the seat, the shoulders are the quote unquote seat of the Nkra, and you have this radiant force in between. And your arms can hold this radiant force like a solar disk surrounding your head and so forth. And it's seated on the shoulders. Just like your head, of course, is seated on the shoulders. The shoulders are the seat of the Nkra. Physiologically, your shoulders are the seat of your head and so forth. Spiritually, your shoulders are the seat of the soul. So it's pinpointing the location. So when you see it spelled out like that, it's simply pinpointing the location of that divinity. But the manifestation, the way the divinity will manifest himself or herself to you, it will manifest himself or herself to you, sometimes in the form of an animal totem and so forth, but very often in the anthropomorphic form. They will take the form of you yourself, and you will see that divinity in the form of yourself, but arrayed in different clothing and so forth. This right here is the Ka, one of the Ka statues of Tutankhamen. So in early Egyptological books, they would translate the word Ka. Sometimes they'll say soul, sometimes they'll define it as spirit, but there's a difference between spirit and soul. The term for spirit in ancient Kamit is Ba. For males, Ba'et. For females, that's the radiant, animate solar force and so forth. Then the Ka, Kayat is divine consciousness. So sometimes they misdefine it as spirit. Some of them know as soul. Some of them misdefine it as spirit. But very often they would also define it as double, image or double. And the reason why they said Ka equals in English image or double is because when the divinity takes the form that you can see clairvoyantly, that divinity, like when you set up your shrine to your Nkra and you communicate and you cleanse your spiritual head and so forth, and you divine with that divinity, he or she will show himself to you or show herself to you in your form. So this is the Ka statue of Tutankhamen. When they found that, when they raided his tomb, they found two of these large statues. They're life-size statues, about over 5 feet tall and so forth. When we go to Kamit and go into the museum in Cairo, you will see these, 5+ feet tall statues of Tutankhamen. When we go to the Valley of the Kings and so forth, you will see the mummy of Tutankhamen. He's the only sovereign, the only Ainsu, whose body is in the Valley of the Kings, in one of the tombs, in his tomb in the Valley of the Kings. The other bodies are in the museums in Cairo and other places. But this is why they call it the image or double. That's their translation, because it takes that form. Now, they talk about it. It is said that the Ka, Kayat, soul, divine consciousness, would reside with the body of the deceased in the tomb for a period. This is because before the spirit of the individual, in concert with his or her Ka or Ka'et, left the physical world to go to the ancestral realm, the relatives of the deceased would come and place ritual offerings, including food at the gravesite of the tomb. This was a means by which the family could facilitate communication with the spirit of their deceased relative for various reasons. That was true in ancient times, continues to be true today. We still place ritual offerings on our ancestral shrines, shrine for the Nkra and so forth, all these different things. Now, we decided to, show that the Ka is like the spirit brain and so forth, the radiant force in the head region, the spirit brain. This is why we utilize that symbolism, but there's another reason we utilize that symbolism also. So you have the term Sahu in ancient Kemet. That term is Sunsum in Akan, which is the spirit body. Now, you see the term Samanu, and you see the shrouded figure. In the Akan language, the term Samain is the term for deceased spirit, misnomer ghost, but deceased spirit, ancestral spirit is Samain, plural Nsamainfo, the group of people, fo, who are spirits, Samain, who are deceased. Samain, a deceased spirit, is the same as Samanu in ancient Kemet, which is a deceased spirit. So we were just showing that the language is the same term in both languages. Now, in this particular section, we're talking about the reality that some spirits, when they transition, if you weren't living in harmony with order on a basic level, you're not allowed to be drawn into the spiritual community of the honored ancestresses and ancestors. Just like if you were living on Earth and you were acting a fool, stealing or robbing and doing drugs and so forth, and there was a big family reunion, you wouldn't be allowed on the property, you wouldn't be allowed in the house, the entire family would reject you, you couldn't come in. You're repelled from that because you're engaged in disorder and you're trying to bring disorder to the family. When you have a spirit, when you're engaged in disordered behavior on a consistent basis, you make yourself repulsive to those who are living in harmony with order and have spirits of order. So when you try to move in that direction, you're repelled because you're engaged in disorder. No different, once again, than the two magnets with the same polarities repelling one another before touching. So if you are out of harmony with order and you transition and you try to make your way to dwell in the spiritual community of the Nsamanfo after transitioning after death, you're repelled. So therefore, you become an earthbound spirit that's just hanging around. As we said before, hanging around the place that you died, hanging around the place where you were murdered, hanging around the place where, schools or jobs or bridges or hospitals or hospice facilities and so forth, homes that you used to live in and so forth. These individuals are hanging out just like a homeless person who hangs out where the place where he used to go to school or he used to live and so forth, and now he's a transient spirit individual hanging around. People walk by and he tries to, harass people and, try to get them to do certain things. And an individual like that transitions, and not just homeless, but anybody who's engaged in disorder and so forth, then they become a transient spirit that's hanging around. They're not allowed in the ancestral realm. They become an earthbound spirit. We talk about one of the reasons we have Aye or funerary ceremonies is to help move these spirits along, help them realize they need to get themselves together spiritually, reground themselves. They need to engage in that spiritual development, cultivation in the spirit realm so they can move to the community of ancestresses and ancestors so they're not hanging around the community, causing people, whispering in the ears of people or pushing people energetically towards certain kinds of behaviors or making people feel lustful or angry or self-destructive or whatever it is. Sometimes these things that you have in your mind about engaging in certain behaviors come from your own triggers, come from your own conditionings, come from your own upbringing, come from your influences from friends, family, other individuals you're not related to, things you watch on television or listen to in music. You constantly program yourself to engage in certain behaviors. But sometimes when you have a strong urge to engage in a certain behavior or move in a certain direction, it's coming from a discarnate spirit of a relative or a non-relative. And if it's a non-relative or even a relative who is disordered, not a spiritually cultivated ancestor or a spiritually cultivated ancestress, but someone who is disordered, then it leads you, if you follow along with that, then you create disorder in your life and you negatively impact those who are connected to you. So that's what we're talking about in this particular section. But we need to talk about that because it's important to note, and we get into this at this particular point, that we have a function. When we go back to the fact that there's a great mother and great father, supreme being, they're the great being, they give birth to smaller beings within them, the deities, the organs within the great divine body that regulate order and creation. And then the organs give birth to smaller beings, which are cells, plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life. Just like your heart cell has a purpose, a function, to serve heart functions. And when it does that, it serves you, the great being, at the same time. When it serves as parent deity, parent abosom, parent orisha, it serves you at the same time. When your liver cell serves its purpose to execute liver functions, then it's serving you, the great being, at the same time. If the liver cell says, I don't want to serve the liver anymore, even though I'm a part of this great organ, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do what the spleen is doing. I want to do what the kidneys are doing. I want to just be a body cell. I don't want to be defined by any particular box, which is idiotic. Then it creates disorder in the body. Every cell comes into being and is formed to execute a specific function in the body. Every one of us is plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Black human life only. Because we have a divinity governing the head, we have a specific function to execute in creation. We're designed and have a specific function. Some of us have a fiery temperament because we have a fire energy complex, because we're a child of a fiery divinity. We bring that fire energy into the world. We're a child of the immune system within the great divine body. So we're naturally inclined towards seeking out disorder, eradicating it in the community, just like your immune system seeks out cancer cells and kills them for the preservation of the whole body. You have that natural inclination if you're a child of the immune system divinity. If you're a child of the renal system divinity, which is the kidneys and so forth that regulate fluid balance and mineral balance, you have a natural inclination towards restoring mineral balance and fluid balance in the great divine body. And in your community, you become a healeress or, ritual specialist and so forth, priestess and so forth, to engage in that kind of ritual. You have a function. That's a so-called destiny, but we use the term function because it's more definitive. It's proper. So to prove that, we go into the cosmology of Kamit, and it's proven in the language of the Akan people as well. So we said earlier, the Ka, the Kait, will disengage from, leave the spirit of the person, return to Nyame wa Nyame Aminet Amen, the Supreme Being, to make a report as to how the individual lived his or her life, and also to receive instructions, direction. Nyame wa Nyame or Aminet Amen will then send the Ka, the Kait, the soul, back to reattach, reconnect to the spirit, the individual, and he lives or she lives in the ancestral realm. Now, the reason why we look at this term here, and this is the beginning of the cosmology of the soul, the term Ka means to leave. That's Ka means soul in ancient Kamit. But as you can see here, Ka, also Kait, means to leave or to take leave. Kra in Akan means soul, the divinity in the head region, divine consciousness. But Kra also means, as you can see right here, to take leave. So the same word that means soul, Ka, is also the same word that means to leave. The same word that means soul in Akan, Kra, is also the same word that means Kra, to take leave. So why is that? First of all, that's evidence of the linguistic identity. We've preserved the same word has two different meanings in ancient Kamit. The exact same word has the same two different meanings in Akan. Now, the Akan phrase "makrawo," I leave you, is used when someone is leaving another's home and so forth. And what happens when we go before Nyame wa Nyame, the great mother, great father, supreme being, they direct that divinity to take up residence in our head region. We're given a function to execute in the world. We're infused with a certain energy complex, whether it's a fiery energy or watery energy or air or earth and so forth, or some gradient in between. Once we have our function, we have the divinity in our head region, then we say, Makrawo, I leave you. We go before Nyame wa Nyame and we receive a Kra, a soul, a divine consciousness, a spiritual force. And once we receive the Kra, then we say, Ma Kra Wo, I take leave. I leave you. You receive the Kra, and then you leave. You Kra, you go out. Now then we get into some cosmology of Amen and Amenet. So of course that's Amen, Amenet. In Akan, Amen is Nyame, as you can see here, Nyame. And Amenet or Amenat is Nyamewa. And just to give a further, corroboration of the continuity of culture, you'll see amongst the Lotsi people, for example, Nyambe is the name of the supreme being on the masculine side. The Herero people, Njambe. The Fang people, Nzambe. The Congo people, Nzambi. You can go from east, central, west, south, north, Afuraitkaitnut, Africa, and you will find Nyame, Nyambe, Njambe, Nzame, Nzambi, all across the board. Everybody is still invoking the same divinity and the feminine as well. So we mentioned that there. And then we get into some cosmology here. Now, we're not going to go through this whole portion because we're simply talking about Amen and Amenet. The first thing they do, the great being, they create the black substance of space. The black substance of space, the whites and offspring call dark energy and dark matter. What we call that Ka and Kait. That is the soul or divine consciousness of Amen and Amenet. That's the first thing they create. Then the next first two divinities they create, expansive and contractive forces. Then next they create Hehu and Hehut. These two divinities right here. That's expansion and contraction. That's the vital principle operant within the black substance. So Hehu, Hehut, the breathing principle. And when they create the male and female force, Hehu and Hehut, expansion and contraction began to happen within the black substance, and it began to vibrate. And then they gave birth to the divinities Nun and Nunet, which is the wave energy within the black substance. And then there was waves of energy manifest within the black substance. And then, of course, Nun and Nunet give birth to Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. And that's the first fire and light that manifests within creation. So we use the example of water boiling. If you pour water in a pot, that's a formless substance that has the capacity to take any form. That's akin to the black substance of space. It's a formless substance that has infinite potential to take any form. When you add heat to the water, that heat causes the water begin to vibrate. The term He, the deities He, Hehu and Hehut in ancient Kamit, the root of the name He means heat. It also means breath. It also means eternal and everlasting. So Hehu is the breathing principle. Those deities of expansion and contraction are the heat principle that generates breath, that generates something that's eternal, everlasting. When you take your first breath, it's continuous until you transition. So Amen and Amenet first created the black substance of space. That's a substance that can take any form, infinite in potential. Then they infuse Hehu and Hehut, expansion and contraction in that black substance, and it begins to vibrate. Then they give birth to Nun and Nunet. Waves of energy begin to move within the black substance, just like when you put heat to the water, it begins to vibrate first, and then waves of energy move throughout the pot of water. Now, as waves of energy, movement is happening. When that movement is happening back and forth, that's energy manifest within the water. That wave energy are the deities Nun and Nonet. And once the waves of energy begin to wave so rapidly that they generate spheres, which are bubbles that rise up and pop and so forth, that means the wave energy gave birth to spheres. Nun and Nonet are the mother and father of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. They're the first fire and light that explode within the black substance, as you can see here. And then they begin to spiral throughout creation, carving out black spheres. That fiery energy carves out black spheres. Those black spheres are penetrated by the energy of Ra and Ra'et, and they become illuminate. Those become the first stars. Then the planetary bodies come from the stars and so forth. So we go through that entire cosmology in detail. But what's important about that in the context of this is the Ka and Kait, the father of the gods, the grandmother of the gods, and so forth. The black substance of space is the black, quote unquote, melanin body of Amenet and Amen. And all the planets, suns, moons, stars, comets, and everything in the universe exists within that black substance, is formed within that black substance, within that consciousness of Amen and Amenet. So they create their capacity for conscious awareness and creativity first, intelligence, wisdom, Ka and Kait. And then within that black substance, they begin to expand and contract, Hehu and Hehut. They generate waves of energy, Nun and Nonet, and then they give birth to spiraling energy of fire and light and so forth, and that is Ra and Ra'et. And just so you can see, let me just show you an example. For those who have never seen that, let's go out of this screen right quick. This is another one of our books, Nyonkumpon and Nyonkunton, Ra and Ra'et. Showing in this book that in the Akan language, Nyonkumpon is the name for the divinity Ra, the creator of the universe. Nyonkunton is the name of the creatress of the universe, which is Ra'et in ancient Kamit. So, we're talking about the energy of Nu Nanet, the wave energy within the black substance of space. And we were talking about how the wave energy manifests as a spiral, and that spiraling energy is shown as a serpent encircling the sun and so forth. The rainbow serpent encircling the sun, rainbow serpent encircling the moon and so forth. The symbolism of the creator and creatress, Ra and Ra'et, who are grandchildren of the Supreme Being. You have your great divine body, Amen or Amenet, and the life force energy surging through your body is your Ra force and your Ra'et force. And you as the great being, Amen, you as the great being, Amenet, direct your Ra force, your Ra'et force, your divine living energy, your solar fire force to go out and create. Whether it's procreating a child or creating something creatively, innovatively, and so forth, the life force energy that you direct is your Ra force and Ra'et force, your creative force, your procreative force. So the Supreme Being, Amen and Amenet, are the grandparents of the creator and creatress, which has always been known across the board until Europeans tried to suppress that, and then our people began to say that Ra and Amen and Batah are just all different names of the same deity, which is idiotic. So, but we're just showing here that the divine living energy of the creator and creatress manifests within the black substance, explodes within the black substance and so forth, but that black substance, Ka and Kait, black spheres were carved from that black substance. The black spheres were penetrated and became illuminate. That's why stars are called black bodies. They give off black body radiation. They came from that original black substance, like coal burning and so forth. Very similar. So, but the black substance of space contains all things in existence, but that is the consciousness, the melanin body of Amen and Amenet. Just like you have melanin that makes your skin brown and so forth, but you have internal stores of melanin within all your organs, glands, your nervous system, and so forth. Your organs, glands, and systems are bathed in black melanin. They were born in black melanin when you were just a cell. You had the melanin, the Ka, Kait, and the cell, and so forth, and they were born out of that. Just like the black substance of space, the planets, suns, moons, and stars are born within that. They are born within Ka and Kait. Now, they're also called Keku and Kekuet, or Kaku and Kakuet, and so forth. But we just saw the other representation of them as Ka and Kait. And you'll see it says darkness personified, one of the four elemental goddesses, darkness personified, darkness, night, Kaka, reduplicated, darkness, gloom, obscurity, and so forth. Talking about these are the dark, the black, expansive and contractive forces of the black substance of space, Ka, Kait, Kaka, Kakayet, Kekka, Kekayet, and so forth, different dialectical variants of the same name. Now, so now we get to our, so first the soul is a divinity. There's a spiritual force dwelling in your head region, male force if you're male, female force if you're female. You experience that force as a pull towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order. And it is our responsibility to align ourselves with that pull in our head, because that is our divine function. The Ka is a divinity. It only directs you to engage in thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with your divine function, meaning in harmony with your functioning in creation, meaning under the direction of the Supreme Being. Your Ka and Kait as an embodiment of divine order will never direct you to engage in behavior that's self-destructive or out of harmony with divine order. It is a divinity, so it's going to always put you in position to operate in harmony with divine order. Now, when we talk about what our divine function is, we said heart cells support heart functions, liver cells support liver functions, spleen cells support spleen functions. They have a form-function relationship. What is our divine function? So now we get into that in the Akan language and language of ancient Kamit. So we see Nkra, Nkrabea. These are the Akan terms, masculine and feminine, for the divine function. In the language of Kamit, you see Kait. You already saw Ka or Kait, meaning soul, divine consciousness, and so forth. Kait, also Kait, also means work, labor, toil. Notice that the individual who's working or laboring or toiling has a vessel on his or her head. So there's something on the head that they're carrying, and it reflects something about work, labor, or toil. In this proper context, when the Akan people say the Okra, the soul, Okraa, soul, is the bearer of the Nkrabea, the Nkra and Nkrabea. Your soul, your divine conscious, is the bearer of your work, labor, or toil, meaning what is your work? What is your divine function? What did you come in the world to do? Your brain carries the blueprint of everything that you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to function, as well as all the different processes that take place within the body and how they are to function and so forth, and sending directives and receiving feedback and so forth. Your brain carries all of that. It is the bearer of your functioning, the functioning of your entire body. Your spirit's brain, written into the nature of your spirit's brain, is your divine function. What kind of cell within the great divine body are you? What kind of energy complex do you have? If you have a fiery energy complex, how are you to use that to contribute to your community? Just like a liver cell has a certain structure, a certain form, it receives nutrients in a certain way and distributes them, and it functions in harmony with the liver. You're a cell. What kind of energy do you have? How were you structured? How do you expand and contract that energy? How do you utilize it to execute your function? All of that is written in the Nkra. That's your Nkra and Nkrabea, your divine function. So when we say work, labor, or toil, Ka, Kait, the same word for soul, is also the term for work, labor, or toil, not just working outside or laboring in the fields and so forth, but what is your divine work? Meaning, what is your divine function? What did you come into the world to do? What did you incarnate in the great divine body to do? What system in the great divine body did you incarnate as a part of? So that's what that symbolism references. So we say if somebody's, has a function, become a healer and so forth, that's their divine function. If there's somebody who's, inclined towards engineering in something, they're a child of the divinity that governs the skeletal system, the structural system in the body. They have a natural inclination towards building structures and edifices and so forth for the benefit of the community. They have a natural inclination towards that. Some people have a natural inclination, as we said, towards defense, children of the immune system and lymphatic system, divinities in the great divine body. So whatever your function is, that's born by your Okraa, Okraa. So that in language of ancient Kamit is Kait, but in Akan, once again, is Kra. So we say Nkra and Nkrabea. That's the masculine is Nkra, the feminine is Nkrabea. Or Bea means woman in Akan. Also, Oba means woman, dialectical variants. That's the feminizing suffix in the Akan language. So if you have Nkra, that's masculine. Nkrabea, that's feminine. So, but the root is Nkra. And then we talk about how that's the divine function in the body. Now, so in this section, we were just showing some, that section we were just showing some of the linguistic information in the Akan language just to prove what we were saying. So when you read through that, you'll understand that. But from the Akan dictionary, you see Nkra, Nkrabea, that's the ancient Kra or Ka, masculine, and Kat, feminine. The feminine suffix in Kamit is the T, so Ka becomes Kat. The feminine suffix in Akan is Bea or Ba, so it becomes, instead of Kra with a T, it's Kra Bea or Kra Ba, and so forth. So the masculine is Kra, feminine is Nkrabea. You say Nkra, taking leave, errand, mandate, order, commission, word, message, and so forth. Nkrabea, Bea also means manner, and we're going to show why. They say fate, destiny, appointed lot, allotted life, and so forth, what's destined to be, and so forth, and all of that. So let's go down a little bit further. We also show Ka and Kait means bull and cow and so forth, masculine and feminine, but you have Kat, work, labor, toil, once again, Kauti, a workman, laborer, artisan, craftsman, and so forth. Now you also have this term, finally, Ka, to think out, to devise, meditate, speak. And then in the Akan language, you have Ka, meaning to speak, to say, to tell, and so forth. Now you have all these definitions of Ka. Ka meaning soul, Ka and Kait meaning soul, divine consciousness, Ka, Kait, work, labor, toil, Ka, Kait, to think, to say, to speak, to tell, and so forth, Ka, Kait, to take leave. All these definitions of Ka and Kait. In Akan, Kra also means soul, divine consciousness, Kra and Krawa. Kra and Krawa also means to take leave. Ka and Krawa also have to do with thinking and saying and telling out. That's the root is Ka and so forth. Why are all these definitions the same term? Because they're all tied together cosmologically. Oh, and you also see, we already saw Ka in Akan language to come be, bring into contact with, to perceive, perception, and so forth. We see perceive, perception, to learn, to come to know, a report, touch, perceived by the sense of feeling, Kat, thought, meditation, and so forth. So let's pull all those definitions together. Why is the same word having all of these different meanings? The Sun Sun spirit is drawn before Nyame wa Nyame. We said that before the spring being. Nyame wa Nyame, or Amen Amen, speaks. The word for speak is Ka. The life's work or assignment, Kat, labor, Nkra, commission, mandate, and the manner, Nkrabea, in which that assignment is to be carried out to the individual. Nyame wa Nyame, or Amen Amen, then directs the great Ka and Kait, the black substance of space, the force in creation that governs the black substance of space, to give one of their offspring a miniature Ka, a divinity, to assist the individual throughout his or her life. That divinity takes up residence in the head region, becomes the personal divinity of the person. Throughout the course of life, the individual is able to consult with his or her personal, boson, personal Ka, Kait, who resides in the head region. The individual thinks, meditates, devises, perceives, learns. That's defined as Kat in ancient Kemet, or Nka in Akan. They think, meditate, devise, perceive, learn from the Ka, Kait, same as Okraa, Okraa on a daily basis for his or her entire life. This allows the individual to harmonize with divine order, Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe, for whenever he or she perceives, learns, which is Nkra, and meditates Ka with his or her personal Ka, Kait, he or she attunes himself to the great Ka, Kait, the soul of Amen and Amen. The Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individual thus always has access to divine guidance through the agency of his or her Ka, Kait. And we said as stated above, once the individual spirit has received his or her Nkra and Nkrabea, his or her divine function, and the manner in which they are to execute their divine function, once they receive that, then the spirit leaves the supreme being, takes leave, Ka, Kra, and returns to the spirit realm as a spirit that has a Kra, and then they are drawn into the physical body to reincarnate into the world. Then we say upon arrival in the physical world via birth, the parents give the newborn child spirit a name which resonates with the energy of his or her Nkra, Nkrabea, so that whenever he or she is called or reflects upon his or her name, his or her spirit, soon will be consciously and energically focused upon the Okraa, and so forth. So you go before Nyame wa Nyame, you receive a Ka, Kait, soul divine consciousness. Nyame wa Nyame speaks, Ka, Kait, to speak, to say, to tell out your divine function, your Ka, Kait, your work, labor, toil to you. Then you take leave from Nyame wa Nyame or Amen, Amen, Kra, Ka, to take leave. Then you go and eventually incarnate into the world. And as you operate in the world and you think and perceive and devise and meditate on how you are to operate, Ka, Kait, think, perceive, devise, meditate, you're invoking the divinity Ka at the same time. And then when you transition, you go before Nyame wa Nyame, and your Ka, your soul, divine consciousness, gives a report, speaks, Ka, Kait, about how you live your life to see if you qualify to live amongst the community of spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors for the next 100, 200 plus years. You live in that community, and then when you transition back into the physical world through one of your great grandchildren who grew up and got married, and they copulate with their spouse, and they draw your spirit back into the world. Until that point, you're living amongst the ancestral community. You spend most of your time living amongst the ancestresses and ancestors in that community. Periodically, you visit the physical, earthly community, sometimes dreams of your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great, and so forth, sometimes through ritual possession. When drumming is happening, ritual dance is happening, ritual prayer is happening, you come down and take up residence in the body and possess somebody to communicate with the community during ritual. After that's over, you go back to the spirit realm and so forth. You spend most of your time in the spirit realm, and every now and then you have a foray into the earthly realm. Just like us here, we spend most of our time communicating with other people, in the physical realm. But periodically, we make a foray into the spirit realm, spirit possession, spirit communication, divination, ritual song, ritual prayer, ritual chant, ritual dance, ritual movement, and so forth, so we can interface with the ancestral community. But we spend most of our time here, and periodically we make that foray. They spend most of their time there, and periodically make that foray to communicate with us, where the two worlds, spiritual and physical realms, unite. Now, so what we say, the Nkra makes a report to Nyame wa Nyame, and that determines how are you going to dwell in the spirit realm. So we show Ka, Kait, soul, divine consciousness, in ancient Kanini Kamit, Ka and Kait, soul, divine consciousness, Akan, Nkrabea, and so forth. Ka, to leave in ancient Kamit, Kra, to leave in Akan. Ka, to speak in ancient Kamit, Ka, to speak in Akan. Ka, or Kat, work or labor in ancient Kamit, Kra, Nkrabea, mandate, function, manner of function, life's work, labor in Akan. Ka and Kait to meditate, devise, thought meditation, Nkra to perceive, to learn. Then you have Ka, the symbol of arms and hands reaching, receiving, Ka to touch, join, perceive by sense of feeling, to cause to be active, in Akan. Ka, the arms and shoulders placed on the head, Kra do in Akan, shoulders, seat of the Kra. There's an image of a divinity with the Ka on the head and so forth. Outer wall of the temple of Heteru in Dendera. Now, let's pull up something real quick. Just to corroborate what we were talking about. Okay, so hold on a second. Okay, so when we visited Kamit recently, and of course we have our trip coming up in September. If you would like to attend that trip, go with us to Kamit and Kait, Egypt and Nubia in September. We have that trip coming up, and we also have our yearly trip in the spring. So this September, September 26th through October 4th, we still have some spaces open for that. June 4th, so that's 5 months from now, 4 months from now, and then June 4th through June 12th next spring, we have a few spaces open for that, and we do have, you know, a couple of those 50% discounted spaces. We'll talk about that at the end. So, question in the chat room: how do you strengthen your connection with the Ka, meditation, ritual, or breathing techniques? So there are like 7 major gateways to the trance state: ritual song, ritual dance, ritual chant, ritual prayer, ritual movement, these different things. These ritual practices are the gateways. And when you engage in ritual practice on a consistent basis in a purified fashion, you begin to strengthen your connection. You strengthen your spiritual receptivity. You also strengthen your spiritual immunity. Just like if you get enough sleep and you exercise and eat right, just in a general way, you maintain your physical immunity so you can walk through the world and, you know, microbes and viruses bounce off of you. When you maintain yourself spiritually, engaging in ritual practice on a consistent basis in a grounded fashion, you maintain your spiritual immunity so you can repel negative thoughts, projections, and energy from discarnate spirits of relatives that are discordant or non-relatives, as well as individuals in your life and so forth. You make yourself more receptive to the communication from the Ka. The book is, we linked the book at the very top. I posted that in the chat room. So, and so this video, just wanted to show this video right quick. When we went to Kamit and go into the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, you'll see it's carved into a mountain and so forth. But one of the images we show is Hatshepsut making an offering to one of the divinities. You'll see Amen there and other divinities. But you also see an image of her Ka, and it's in her form, walking about and so forth. They call it the royal Ka. For her, it's the royal Kait, but it's an image of the Ka as well as her own image. So, that's Hatshepsut in the form of a Shestepanot, so-called Sphinx. So that temple is carved in the mountain. This was like the 6th day of our trip. This is Hatshepsut herself, the regalia, and she's making an offering to a divinity. And this is her soul, her Kait, the royal Kait, in the form of a diminutive individual. And you will see the Ka symbol on top of the head and so forth. There's a shrine of Heru adjacent to the temple on the side of the temple. These columns have the face of Heru on the top. Okay, so that was on the sixth day of our trip. But when we went into the temple, that temple of Heru that's on the side, so you see the outer temple, well, you see the temple of mortuary temple of Heru, of Hatshepsut, and then on the side, there was a small shrine, quote unquote, chapel or shrine for Heru, where ritual invocations of Heru used to take place by the priests and priestesses and so forth. At the time that we went, there weren't a lot of people visiting, so we were able to spend time in that shrine, that sacred shrine of Heru, without any interruption. So, and the energy, of course, is strong because whenever we come into these temples, the ancestral spirits of the people of ancient Ka and Kait come into the temple. When white people are walking around, our ancestresses and ancestors are now filling up the temples when they come. When we show up, the ancestral spirits show up. When we come into a temple, when Black people come into a temple, those ancestral spirits who used to operate within these temples and so forth, who are connected to us by blood, they come in. And this is why even Europeans would say the energy is different when Black people come into and tour these different places. Even the Arabs would say that, even though they're mad and so forth, because we know who we are, and they're pretending like they're the Egyptians, but they will say, and to one another and sometimes to our people privately, the energy changes when we show up. And of course, we know that. So, okay, so question about, is there a book for these practices, how to purify? So we, let me just show this real quick. So we've done a number of online courses, and some of them deal with ritual practice that you're asking about. This is our Akongwa Suya page. We have 38 online courses. Some of them were 4-week courses. Some of them were 6-week courses. They are all archived now, and they're 50% off. So the 6-week courses archived are $15. The 4-week courses archived are $10. But you'll see a number of different classes. But for example, the Nkra course that we did speaks directly to what you're asking about. So this is an Nkra course, for example, and it says 4 elemental rituals of spirit communication, a practical instruction. So we talk about Oshue, Nkombre, Susuhon, and Okra, which is libation, ancestral shrines, ritual meditation, and soul washing or ritual cleansing of the head and so forth. So that's that's one of the classes where we deal with practical instruction of ritual practice. Okay, so we want to just finish up with regard to the Okra Complex. So we talked about the Nkra and Nkrabea. Nkra means, your mission, errand, divine function. And Nkrabea, the feminine aspect of that, is the manner in which you execute the function. You have a function to execute and a specific manner in which you execute the function. It's just like a male can impregnate a female, but the unfolding of, the development of the embryo and cell mitosis and division and so forth, There's a specific manner and pattern in which that unfolds, and it happens inside of the woman. Of course, it doesn't. The embryo is not implanted inside the male, it's implanted inside the womb and so forth, and it unfolds according to a specific form and function and pattern. So you have a function, Nkra, but then you have a manner in which you are to execute that function that's unique to you. Nkrabea. That's the masculine and feminine aspect of the consciousness of your divine function. What am I here to do? And what's the manner in which I am to execute that? That's Nkra and Nkrabea. Now, but then you also have the She and Shebia. And just to go to that quickly, is She is a verb meaning to fix, to arrange, to compel, fixing, putting on, and so forth, compulsion. To fix, to establish, and so forth, to set, to constitute, to appoint, excuse me, to predestinate a point or ordained beforehand, to be predestined, and so forth. So, and then you'll see She Bea, predestination, decree, and all of that. So, many Akan scholars and European scholars, they will mix up Nkrabea and Shebia. And they'll say, well, the Akan people have a dual destiny, Nkrabea and Shebia. Or they'll say, Nkrabea and Shebia is really just the same word because they couldn't properly define it. They didn't know that Nkra was the masculine side, Nkrabea was the feminine side. For the consciousness of your divine function, what you are to do, who you are, the manner in which you are to execute it. But then She and Shebia, once again, are the masculine and feminine aspects of the divine energy complex you have been given to execute your function. If you have a function to, be a healer or a healeress, that's your divine function. And there's a certain manner in which you are to execute that function. But what kind of energy complex are you given to support that function? You're not just given a function and no energy to deal with it. If you're to use fire to purify and so forth and engage with that divine function, then you're assigned to a fiery divinity who carries that energy, and that fiery divinity is inherited through your patriclan and matriclan and so forth. If you have a cool, watery approach modality to healing, then you're assigned to a water divinity, and you carry that energy and you learn how to expand and contract that cool energy of that specific water divinity to engage your healing function. If you have an earth energy and you utilize that earth energy to, execute your healing function, then you're assigned to an earth divinity. You carry that energy out. You learn how to expand and contract that earth energy so you can utilize that modality for healing. Whatever your function is, you're assigned to a specific patriclan and matriclan divinity that carries that function. Just like you receive genetic material from your father through the sperm cell, Y chromosomal DNA, you receive mitochondrial DNA, genetic material from your mother within the ovum, then his genetic material, which gives you certain kinds of characteristics that you receive from him, and her genetic material, you receive certain kinds of characteristics, including phenotype and so forth, you receive from the mother. They combine to create a unique individual. Well, the spiritual force that animated the sperm cell is the patriclan divinity, and the spiritual force that animated the ovum cell is the matriclan divinity. So just like you have DNA from your mother, DNA from your father, but then you have your own personality. Your mother and father are two different entities. They contribute genetic material, fused together to make a unique body, which is yours, and then you're an ancestral spirit who takes up residence in that body. So you have energy from them, energy from, the father and mother, but then you also come into the world with your unique function. The same thing spiritually. When we say She in Akan, the HY is the sh sound in Akan. So She, to stick, to be fixed and so forth. She, the act of fixing. She, to set, to constitute, to appoint. to predestine, predestinate, appoint, or ordain beforehand, and so forth. To command. Well, when you look in the language of ancient Kamit, she, to fix, to appoint, to decide, to determine, to decree, ordain, and so forth, predestinate. And then the feminine aspect is she, to a shayet, something decreed or ordained by God. What is ordained by man or fixed by custom is what is seemly or fitting, dues, revenues, taxes, and all of that. What is decreed or ordered or ordained, fate, destiny. So the same term in Akan, she, to predestine, predestinate, to fix, to arrange, to appoint, to constitute, ordain, decree beforehand, and so forth, is the same she or shai in ancient Kemet. She and shebiya, the feminine in Akan, is she and shayet in ancient Kemet. So once again, we have these cosmological concepts that are identical. And when you see in an ancient dictionary, hieroglyphic dictionary, to fix, to appoint, to predestine, predestinate, then in the Akan dictionary, to set, constitute, predestine, predestinate, or ordain beforehand. So these are not arbitrary meanings. When you have a missionary in the 1850s sitting in the forest in the region of Ghana and asking people, what does this word mean? What does this word mean? They're compiling a dictionary. When they say she, and they know it means to predestine, to predestinate, and what comes because the divinities infuse some, energy into you and so forth, and how to function in the world. When they're saying that and the missionary is writing this down, but then when you look in a text dealing with the Medutu, thousands of years old, and the sound combinations she mean to predestinate, ordain, decree, ordain beforehand, divine destiny, and so forth. We're talking about the same people with the same terms, with the same functions, the same cosmological meanings intact, because we're the same people who just migrated. And then you have the divinity, Shai or Shay, the god, luck or fate or destiny. That's the way they would try to define it. And then you have Shayet, the goddess of fate, the goddess fate, and so forth. So you have in Kanini Kemet, Shai, to fix, appoint, predestinate, and Akan, She, to fix, appoint, predestinate, compel, impel, Shayet, that which is ordained, decreed, She, Bia, instead of She, Et, is She, Bia, and Akan, that which is ordained, decreed, and so forth. Here, by the way, is the Ba, which is the spirit, which is different from the Ka, the soul. Ba is the divine living energy, solar fire moving through you. When we talk about She and Shebia, the motive force of compulsion, and let's just scroll down because we'll finish this section right here. Your Nkra and Nkrabea is your consciousness of your divine function. We just said that, how we fit into the reality of creation, Abadie, which is creation. We exercise this consciousness to operate in the world. We attune to our Nkra and Nkrabea in order to know the nature of our function, Nkra, we are to execute in the world, and the manner, Bea, Nkrabea, in which we must execute that function in any given moment and within any given situation in a harmonious fashion. What is your function, and how do you execute that function no matter where you are at any time and at any place in your life? Who are you? What is your function? Why are you in the world? What kind of energy complex do you have? But what is your function? What is the nature of your function? And how you are to express that at any given moment, any given time. That's Nkra and Nkrabea. Then you have the She and Shebia, which is your motive force. Our impulsion and compulsion to will, our appointed energy complex in order to properly operate in the world, meaning according to the dictates of the divine function, the Nkra and Nkrabea. We are tuned to the She and Shebia in order to know the nature of the resources, She, Shayet, we have our uniquely assigned spirit energy complex and the manner in which we must utilize that energy complex in any given moment within any given situation in a harmonious fashion. So you have a function, you need to know what your function is, and then you have an energy complex. How do you expand and contract that energy? If you're a child of a fiery divinity, how do you expand that fiery energy within you and utilize it to support your function? If you're a child of a watery divinity, how do you expand and contract that energy force within you to utilize it to execute that function? So you have a function, Nkra and Nkrabea, and you have an energy complex to execute that function, the She and the Shebia. This is why we call it the Okraa Complex. And we created this schematic so you have a better understanding of it. Your brain is a shrine for the Okraa. Your brain is the physical representation of the shrine of your soul, the divinity dwelling in your head. The cerebral cortex, right and left hemispheres, have to do with consciousness and cognition and knowledge and understanding and awareness and so forth. That's Nkra and Nkrabea. Then the cerebellum, the two hemispheres of the cerebellum back here, represents and deal with motor movement, energy, equilibrium, balance, force, and so forth. That's the She and Shebia. So that is the Okraa Complex. You have the knowledge of your divine function, the manner in which you are to execute that divine function, and then you also have the knowledge of the energy complex you've been given and how to expand and contract that energy complex to support that divine function. That is the Okraa Complex. And then we show the deities that govern. In ancient Kamit, it's Ka and Kait, divine consciousness and so forth, Shai and Shayet. And Akan, the related terms of Nkra, Nkrabea, She and Shebia and so forth. So, so as you're reading through the book, you have a better understanding, a complete understanding of what we are dealing with. And just so you can see, as a matter of fact, let's switch over real quick. We talked about the 38 online courses. And we showed the Hoodoo course and so forth, but one of the 38 online courses, we did a 6-week online course called Okraa. As you can see here, that 6-week online course is archived and it's $15. So you get the entire 6 weeks of videos and so forth. And we go through the book as well as other books and articles and so forth in detail, and we cover every aspect of the book. So what we're doing today is, talking about the basic fundamental principles. But when you go through that 6-week course, we go through the entire book plus additional information. So just to finish this out, this is a kuruo from the Akan tradition. This vessel, often used as a purification for the Okraa, the soul divine consciousness. Now we have a quote: "The Kra, the soul, is worshipped. It is given offerings." Hold on one second. Let me flip back over so you can see this. Okay. So this is the kuruo. That is the vessel in Akan tradition, used for the purification of the Okraa as well as other things and so forth. But we quote from one of the Ghanaian authors. That particular article was written back in the 50s and so forth. He says, "Kra is worshipped. is given offerings. Among some of the Akan tribes, each person has an altar for his Nkra. That's from the Akan Concept of the Soul by Sam Akesan. So we have a shrine. We have a shrine for our Nkra. We have that for ourselves when our children get to a certain age. Within our Kwamo and Madukai TV move, when they turn 7, they receive their own shrine for their Nkra. But it's a shrine for the Nkra. You set up that specific shrine to communicate, to have a stationary space, energetic space to communicate with the divinity that governs your head. Of course, you can communicate with the Nkra anywhere you are at any time in the world, but sometimes you want to set aside a space, block out any other distractions from what you're doing at that particular time so you can sit down and commune with that divinity. And the more you engage in that ritual practice, the more receptive you become. And then you, at some point, you begin to be able to see clairvoyantly that divinity himself or herself and so forth. But we make a comparison. So we, in the Akan tradition, among some of the Akan tribes, each person has an altar for the Nkra. He's writing in the 1950s. As people got more and more involved in the pseudo-fake religion of Christianity with the fictional cartoon character Jesus or the fictional cartoon character Muhammad and Allah in Islam, or the fictional cartoon character Yahweh and so forth in Judaism and so forth, when they embraced the fake pseudo-religions with these fictional cartoon characters and left some of our practices to the wayside, you find that a lot of people don't have a shrine for the Nkra any longer. In some of the rural areas, people do, but a lot of people have fallen away from the practice. And some of them, because they see us reinvigorating the practice, they begun to reinvigorate their practices and reinstitute their practices as well. So that's in the Akan tradition. Then we make a comparison from Ori Lonise, the hermeneutics of the head and hairstyles among the Yoruba, by Babatunde Lawal. He says Yoruba religion focuses on the worship of the Orisha because of the belief that they act on behalf of Olodumare, who is too exalted to be approached directly. Yet Olodumare is indirectly involved in the day-to-day life of an individual through his or her Ori Inu, which is the spiritual head, the inner head, the soul, divine consciousness, the deity in the head, which is also called Ori Apere Asini Waye, venerable head, one's guardian spirit in the physical world. We just said that the Okra, the Ka, is the divinity in the head region. They just said it's the guardian spirit in the physical world. Now, thus in the past, every adult Yoruba dedicated an altar to the Ori Inu. The practice continues today in the rural areas. Just like with the Akan, just like with Ewe and other people, when colonization came in and the fake religions came in, it used to be a common practice that everybody had a shrine to the Okra in the Akan tradition. Everybody had a shrine to the Ori Inu in the Yoruba tradition. Everybody had a shrine to the Selido amongst the Ewe people and Fon people who practice Vodun. Everybody had a shrine to the Chi in the Igbo tradition. Everybody knew what it was. When people started getting involved in the fake religions, they stopped communicating with the divinity that governs their head and started worshiping a fictional cartoon character. So, but some people are starting to get back into real practice. So when we say the Abosom, the Okra is worshipped, or we ship or send our words, our sound vibrations, our ritual invocations to provoke the energy of the divinity. In Kamit, Ka or Kara, shrine or sanctuary. This is a Kra, a shrine in Kamit. You have the Him Ka in Kamit, the priest of the Ka. You have the Het Ka, the Ka chapel or portion of the tomb set apart for the dwelling of the Ka. The instructions of Ptah Hetep from 4,500 years ago, the instructions of Ptah Hetep, or the maxims or precepts of Ptah Hetep, is considered the oldest book in the world. There's no book or composition written prior to the instructions of Ptah Hetep. So the oldest book on earth, one of the instructions says, follow your ab, which is your spiritual heart, the will of the Ka Kait as long as you live. Do not make a loss on what is said. Do not subtract time from following the Ab, which is the spiritual heart. It is offensive to the Ka'et, to waste its time. So it's offensive to the Ka, your soul, your divine consciousness, the deity that's dwelling in the head region. It's offensive to the divinity in your head to waste your time. You should be following the Ab, the spiritual heart, which is your divine function, the will to follow your divine function. That's what you came into the world to do. You should be doing that. It's offensive to your Ka to waste its time. So that's what the oldest book on earth says. It's already talking about how we should follow our Ka. Now, and just a couple of other things. So in that section, we were talking about the matriclan and patriclan divinities, the Abusia Bosom and Eja Bosom and so forth. In our Akan culture, of course, we were born on certain days to indicate what deity we are assigned to. We're assigned to a specific divinity, then that deity will send us into the world so we can be born on his or her day as an indication to the community who we were assigned to pre-incarnation in the spirit realm. So we're talking about that. And then we give some examples of different things, but just wanted to show this. Here you have on the divine potter's wheel, you have the divinity Kunwemu, who fuses together the body and the soul on the divine potter's wheel. And of course, that's happening within the womb and so forth. And you see the same thing happening here. He's fusing together the body and the soul on the divine potter's wheel. And we had this once again from the mortuary temple of Queen Hatshepsut. This particular section says, Amin Ra, which is Inyame in Akan, called for Kunem, the creator, the fashioner of the bodies of men, fashion for me the body of my daughter and the body of her Ka, said Amin Ra. A great queen will I make of her, and honor and power will be worthy of her dignity and glory. O Amin Ra, answered Kunwemu, it will be done as you have said. The beauty of your daughter will surpass that of all of the Ntoru deities and will be worthy of her dignity and glory. So Kunwemu, the potter divinity, the ram-headed divinity, fashioned the body of Amin Ra's daughter and the body of her Ka, the two forms exactly alike and more beautiful than the daughters of men. He fashioned them of clay with the air of his potter's wheel, and Heket, the Ntoro, the goddess of birth, knelt by his side, holding the Ankh towards the clay, that the bodies of Hatshepsut and her Ka might be filled with the breath of life. And this is the frog goddess with the Ankh and so forth. Same here. So of course, when they talk about, Adam was fashioned from the clay of the ground and, he was given the breath of life, of course, it's stolen from this text as well as many other texts talking about, the deities being fashioned ultimately from the deity Atem, who operates with the red setting sun and so forth. This is where they get Atem or Adam from, the red ruddy one and so forth. And the first man on earth, they stole that from the deity Atem. But this notion of placing the Ankh and invigorating through the breath of life, the spirit, the body and the soul and so forth, fused together, that's where they got that from. And in this final section, we just talk about this notion of that's a shrine for the Kra, water that's infused with ritual incantation and so forth, use it to purify the head. For the average Akan person, we engage in Okra Guare or soul washing at least once a week on the day that we came to the world. So since I was born on Awusida or Sunday, My name is Kwesi because I'm a child of the divinity Awusi or Asi. So Kwa, Asi is a servant of Asi, Kwasi or Kwesi and so forth. Today is the day I engage in Okra Guade. I came into the world on Awusi Dawa Sunday. I purify my Kra on Awusi Dawa Sunday because my Kra is Kwasi or Kwesi and so forth, which is a child of the divinity Awusi. So, but every Akan person purifies their spiritual head on the day of the week that they were born. All groups, Yoruba people have forms of cleansing, the Ori. Ewe people have forms of cleansing, the Selido. Igbo people have, ways to cleanse their chi. Akan people do it based on our Akan calendar and our ritual expressions and so forth. Everybody has their own way of doing it. It's not all the same, but ultimately, ritual purification of the head so you can be more receptive to the divinity that dwells in the head. Everybody does that. So, second, let me. Okay, we also just showed this just for comparison's sake. The traditional gua or agua throne and so forth that elevates heads of state. The Akan tradition, misnomered stools. Europeans want to say we have stools and white people have thrones, but this is a throne and so forth, agua. But you see in ancient Kamit, the ures, which elevates the head of the person when they're sleeping and so forth, is in the same form of the traditional Akan, agua, or throne as well. Just one of many comparisons. And then we have shrines for the cross. So we show this. It says in the past, the kuruos, with or without jewelry, were often placed inside the grave or on top of the grave superstructure. Also, kuruos were used as containers to ritual offerings presented to ancestors and deities at shrines. Kuruos were exhibited in stool rooms and festivals, which is throne rooms. Kuruos sometimes served as vessels containing holy water used in the ritual purification of a chief's soul. That's the Okra water. During female puberty rites and rites for twins in Akan society, kuruos were used as containers with mashed yam and eggs, which is a sacred ancestral food offering and so forth. And today we, those are ornate vessels. We would just take a glass bowl or other kind of bowl, pour the water in the bowl, engage in ritual incantation to energize the water based on the nature of the divinity's energy, and then utilize that purified, energized water to cleanse our physical head and also our spiritual head. So that's what we're talking about in that particular section. And then we show some of the Nkra symbols associated with that and how they're related to the symbolism in ancient Kamit. This is another, you look in the book of Coming Forth by Day, there's a Uras with a little pillow on top. There's a section talking about that in the Rudu, Pertinent Heteru, and so forth. So, and the text that deals with that from plate 32 of the Ani Papyrus, the book of Coming Forth by Day, Misnomer, the Book of the Dead, the text for the chapter of the Uras, the headrest. What it says is make, and this is about 3,300 years ago that this text was published, placed in the tombs of people who transition. May the pigeons awaken you when you are asleep. That's a sacred animal totem. O Ani, may they awaken your head at the horizon. Raise yourself so that you may be triumphant over what was done against you. For the Ntoro, the god Ptah, has failed your enemies or killed your enemies. And it is commanded that action be taken against those who would harm you. So the deities direct us to kill our enemies and those who will potentially try to harm us. You are Heru, son of Het Heru, the male and female fiery serpents, to whom was given a head after it had been cut off. Your head will not be taken from you afterwards. Your head will not be taken from you ever. So it's talking about the importance of purifying and maintaining the spiritual head. If your head leaves you and so forth, there's a condition where if you engage in disorder on a consistent basis, the Nkra, the divinity, will separate, disengage from you and go back to Inyame wa Inyame. And now you're a spirit without a soul. You're, a spirit without a cry and so forth. And people who are in that condition, which is a grave condition, either go mentally insane, they become extremely antisocial, murderers and every other kind of thing, or they die. So the phrase Nkra Driane means his Kra has fled from him. And if you don't engage in ritual practice to draw the Kra back so he or she can reinstall himself or herself in your head region, then you suffer the negative consequences of that. Okay, so that's the information we want to share on Kra. Just want to make sure we didn't miss any questions. Yes, so the divinity dwells, with us. This is a shrine for the divinity, so that our personal divinity governs our head region and so forth. And just like you can communicate with an elder and sit down with an elder or elderess, and they give you, sage advice about certain things about how to live in harmony with order in any situation in life. The divinity that governs you, that is your first direct elder or elderess, that spiritual force will guide you and also communicate directly with you. Okay, so buying any course that you are interested in, go to the Akongwa Suya page on the website, and I'll put that link in the chat room. And you will see all of the 38 courses that we've taught over the years and so forth, including the Okraa course. You'll see that there. So that's in the chat room right now. Okay, share the multiple levels of consciousness that are reached when you have a sound ba or bayu. So basically you're living in harmony with divine order. So it's when you're, sometimes we do this, we have flashes of that. When you get fed and directed by your Ka, your Kait, your soul, your divine consciousness, and you make proper decisions. You know what you're supposed to do. You live in harmony with order. Things work out for you in a harmonious fashion. And you're doing that. Now, sometimes we fall off track and we don't, we make mistakes and then we have negative consequences that impact us and people connected to us and so forth. The more you grow and develop, the less and less you fall out of harmony or out of alignment with your Kra. Someone who's an honored elder or elders, one of the Nananum Mpanyinfo, that means that they live in harmony with the direction of their Kra, their Krawa, 100% of the time. Now, as younger people, we may live in harmony with the Kra 50, 60, or 70% of the time, and 30% of the time we don't. And that's where our problems arise. But as you grow and develop and mature, 80, 90 to 100% of the time, you're always living in harmony with divine order every moment of every day. And when you do that, your consciousness expands, you're more receptive, you have more receptivity in general, plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afurakani, human life. You have people who are priests or priestesses or healers or healeresses, and they can attune to the spirits of plant life, animal life, mineral life, and procure medicine because they're directed by them, as well as the abosom and so forth. You have to be receptive in order to hear that and attune to that. If you're controlled by lust or misguided desire or malice and so forth, self-destructive behavior activity, that deadens your receptivity. But when you get in harmony with order because you're being responsible, disciplined, you're being an adult, it's not about, mysticism or something like that. We're dealing with the forces in nature, but we have to be adults, just like you direct children to stop crying about certain things. They're too old to operate like that. When we're adults and we live according to who we are by nature, we seek to align every thought, every intention, every action, every moment of every day. And when we make a legitimate mistake, not just being self-destructive deliberately, but a legitimate mistake, we engage the ritual process to incorporate divine law and restore divine balance. Okay. Now, okay, so for you, you saw the video from the Mortuary Temple of Hatshepsut. When you go on our page, you'll see we have about 14 different videos. That was just one of them. We have about 14 different videos from our recent trips to Kamit. As we said before, we have a tour coming up. We have a tour coming up in September 26th through October 4th, which is, just, a few months away from now, a September autumn tour. And for those who cannot make the autumn tour, we have our regular spring tour, which next spring, instead of May, it's going to be June 4th through June 12th. You see that here. So what you will also see is we have a couple of things. We have a 50% discount. We have a couple of spaces left open for that for both tours, a 50% discount. So instead of paying $3,000, it's $1,500. In order to take advantage of that, you either pay the entire amount up front or you pay half of it up front. And then within 2 weeks, you have to pay the second half because we only have a couple of spaces for that. And some people, if they're ready to pay the whole thing, then they're going to get the space. So whether you want to go in September or October or September or next June, we have that. Now, we sent out an email, and if you didn't get the email, you can see, actually, I'll show it on the YouTube page. The link is on the YouTube page, so if you didn't get this email, you can see it on the YouTube page. So this video says Odwirafo offers free trip to Kamit and Kait. So click on that video. We're talking about if you can get 4 people to register. You show them the videos, go to the Arika page, you can see the videos and so forth. See what the trip entails and so forth and all the different things. We have 5-star hotels and cruises and everything else, but we're visiting 12 different sites, 13 different sites in 12 different cities from northern Kamit all the way to Kamit, Nubia, and so forth. So if you can get 4 people who are interested to register, they pay in full, then your trip to Kamit would be free. So if you wanted to go in September or if you wanted to go in June, whether you got 4 people in September or 4 people in June or 2 people in September and 2 people in June or whatever it is, but if you had 4 people to register, they pay in full, then your trip to Kamit is free. So if you know a married couple or a couple of people or part of a group, family members and so forth, 4 different people who are ready to do that, then you can go for free. When you look at that video and you see the link to the constant contact email that we sent out, you'll see that PayPal has a financing option. So PayPal Pay Later or PayPal Credit, as they call it. One of the options is paying $149 a month for 24 months. So when you go through PayPal, it's basically like having a line of credit with PayPal, and you pay them monthly. So your trip is paid for when you go through that process, and then you pay PayPal monthly over the next 24 months, but you'll be able to go, your trip is paid for, so you'll be able to go to Kamit either in September or June. We also have our regular payment plans for those who are not approved or who just want to do a regular payment plan. Put a down payment, and then you can make monthly payments. You decide how much you want to pay per month. You send the monthly payments until you pay off the trip. But we have that financing option through PayPal, Pay Later. So whether they finance the full $3,000 trip, if they miss the discount, $149 a month is one of those options, depending on who's approved. Or if somebody wants to take advantage of the discount and they want to finance that, it's like $71 a month for 24 months. That's one of the options. Or some people, it may be $100 a month. It just depends on your approval and what they approve you for. But these are ways that we try to assist people who never thought they would be able to get to Kamit or not anytime soon to see, I could actually go in September. I could actually finance this trip and go in September, or I can get a few people who are interested in either the June trip or the September trip. And once they pay, then my trip is paid in full. So this is one of the ways we do that. Okay, so yeah, for the discounted spaces, the 50% discount, we have about 2 for September and 2 for May. I'm sorry, 2 for next June, 2 for this September left, and 2 for June next year left. So if you want to get those spaces, get those as soon as possible. We had somebody sign up for one today, so they took one of those, discounted spots. So those are just first come, first serve. Okay, so it's after 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. If you just want to make sure I didn't miss it. All right, if you have any questions, send us an email, kwesiakan@gmail.com. We're Odwirafo on Instagram, Kwesiakan on Facebook. Of course, you can go to the website, go to our email address on the website and so forth. You can make comments in the chat room or the comment section on the video and so forth. Any one of those ways you can, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. So once again, Yedase, we thank everybody for tuning in. We just wanted to do this special examination because this is the 10th anniversary of the release of this book. We released it in April of 2013. It's 13,023, 2023. So we wanted to, acknowledge that and give people some information. So, you see people online talking about the nature of the soul and they try to sound, deep or esoteric, and everything they're saying is 100% inaccurate. So we want to bring some clarity. So again, Yedase, we thank you for joining us, and Yabeshabio, we will meet again.